But it was during this time that you started doing digital inks, wasn't it?
Yeah, because you know when I worked for Fleetway doing the Judge Dredd stuff, you know I was penciling, inking, painting, everything myself. And then when I started working for the Americans, somebody else was doing the colouring, and it's just, I've said before, it's a bit like having kids and then giving them to the neighbours to bring up for you. I just couldn't understand why people would want to, you know, like spend all this time doing their work and then give it to somebody else to do the colours, which can really make it or break it. You know, they can really help the flow of the storytelling, or they can just completely stall it. You know.
I think we're spoiled though. I think because a lot of American artists, they don't have to do everything themselves. Whereas if you start working over here, you do have to do everything yourself. Usually, you sort of get a bit spoiled, even though you might not be very good at it. It's nice to be able to do that because you're like your aesthetic carries through the artwork, doesn't it? And, and whether you think you've done a good job or a bad job, it's still, you haven't handed it off to somebody else to do a bad job.
Have you got the Sandman poster there?
Yeah.
I did an 8-page short for a Sandman book, yeah, and I painted it. It was before I'd learned to use Photoshop, and this was the pencils and inks, which obviously, you know, they do look far too plain, but it was me that was going to be painting it, so I was quite happy that they looked that plain because I put a lot of detail into the paints. Now, if you flick back to the black and white again, if you give that to 10 different colourists, you're going to get 10 really, really different images back.
And probably none of them are going to put the amount of work in you have either.
No, because it's absolutely, it's just not cost effective.
Yeah.
I did this because, I just leave the coloured one on now. I did this because for all the years I'd been working at DC, they would never let me paint covers, they would never let me colour covers, they would never, you know, they always had to be given to a professional.
Why is that? Did they
because,
give a reason?
Yeah, because, well, they usually made excuses about time and stuff like that, but basically what it came down to is they wanted a professional colourist to colour the stuff, and they knew that, yeah, I used to colour stuff 10 years ago when I worked for that comic over in London, you know, but
they didn't want these dull, wishy-washy colours.
Well, they didn't know anyway, because, you know, it was just that way. I'd been away from colouring for too long, so they best give it to somebody that knew what they were doing. And I took on this job to do this 8-page story in a Sandman book, and I had the opportunity to paint it, and it was just, it was normal vertical rates, which are pretty low, and these pages took me a long. I mean, basically these took me a week per page, working really long hours, and you know, for a really low page rate. And the reason I did it was because I had been so long away from colouring things that I really wanted. I wanted to do a few pages, and this was a really short story. And I'd read all of Neil Sandman's stuff anyway, so it was, you know, it was an honour to be invited. It was actually, do you know, it was Mobius that was supposed to be doing this strip, and he said, of course he would do it. You know, he would love to. And then, being Mobius, he
went on.
Yeah, he never got back to them because he had something else to do. But so they needed to find somebody else, and they asked me, and I, you know, they said, you know, who did I want to colour it? And I said, can I colour it myself? And they said, well, you know, it's just the vertical colouring rate, which was really pretty low, and I wanted to paint it. These are the roughs that I sent in. This is a book that's the Book of Destiny. That's got everything in it. Yeah. But yeah, the reason I wanted to do this was I was so sick of other people colouring my work. And I mean, Laura Dupuy, as she was then, coloured Earth 2. It was just gorgeous, but I mean, it's not like I hate everybody else colouring my work. There's always a lot of stuff that I just don't like, and there's always a lot of stuff that I need to put in more detail in the inks, simply because colourists naturally, they're not going to go in and actually basically draw with shadows. You know, they're not paid to do that. And I wasn't
Also,
paid to do it in this, but
actually skilled enough to do that either.
well,
that's me.
Yeah, and it's a different thing altogether
Yeah.
anyway. But yeah, so I did this, and you know, purely because I wanted something that. Here was a page that was just me. Everything that you see on the page was me. There wasn't somebody else inking it. There wasn't somebody else colouring it. And then after that, ever since then, I've been allowed to colour covers if I want. But you know,
what's interesting about this as well, I thought, from a storytelling point of view, you didn't do frames or anything. It's a completely different storytelling approach.
well, every page was a two panel page, and every page was described as like the big shot and the inset. And
so you just combine them.
yeah, and sometimes like with this, you know, I just had Destiny's face coming out of the shadowed shape of his hood. And if you go back to the one with the in the hall, that one, yeah, just with mucking about with the thumbnail roughs, you know, I had you've got the 7 portraits of the 7 siblings. One of them's a mirror because it's actually Destiny's house or whatever it is that he's in. So he's actually seen in the mirror. One of them's covered up because he's away missing. And then what I did was, each of the portraits, rather than do them as colour portraits, which might kind of look a bit like it wouldn't really distinguish them enough as portraits, I did them as this kind of Michelangelo, you know, a sepia ink sketchy look. And then I came up with this idea of doing, again, it's that thing that I did in the X-Men with the gym hall and the lines on the floor. Rather than draw some huge elaborate hall, all the information that you actually need about the story and what's going on in the story is actually in the setup of the mirror, the pictures. Yeah, it's always trying to make everything as simple and easy to understand as possible. And so rather than do this big elaborate hall, I thought, well, I could suggest that it's a big elaborate place simply by having sunlight coming in through some sort of cloistered, you know, arches, which would kind of echo the pictures. It just gives you that simple L-shaped, here's a wall, here's a floor, it's going into perspective. You know, there's outside out there somewhere. You know, you can see a bit of it in the mirror. And then it allowed me to do the second panel, you know, set into one of these arches of light. And because I had done each of the portraits as these kind of inky sepia sketches, it meant that I could put Death's face in, just as, you know, it's almost like, it's just part of that picture that you can see just above there. So again, there's lots and lots of thought and forward planning, but everything is about trying to make it as simple as possible. So
it's sort of simple and not simple, isn't it? What I like about it is there's a certain implication that slowly dawns on you. You're not showing everything, but then you're not, there's a certain revealing of it. As a reader, you've got to be aware. It's like, oh, hang on, yeah, I understand the light and everything. Oh, hang on, that's inside. Yeah, I can see the window there.
Yeah. But the thing is, you should be able to flick through it pretty quickly if you're bored and you're not interested and you don't like the art style, you know, and still have an idea of what's going on. You know, you shouldn't actually have to sit and look at it all for, you know, multiple readings before you start picking it up.